frenzy. The Reverend stood in the middle of it all, eyes fixed on the tiled ceiling. Everyone was grabbing at his shoulders, at his gut, just hoping to touch the man with the golden voice. Prayer alone wasn't enough. The Reverend was moved to act. He led the crowd to the storage room behind the gym, where there were dozens of aluminum baseball bats. He passed them around. "Fear no man," he said, before directing the crowd to the library, where he'd heard there was an interfaith art project. You followed too. There was no art project, but one of his adult followers was able to locate a cassette tape the gym teachers used during sex education. "This is a good start," the Reverend said. He laid the tape on the checkout counter and raised his bat in the air. He held it there for a second, like an old general rallying his troops. You don't remember the swing, but you remember the impact, the bits of plastic shooting in every direction. His followers roared. Wyatt, however, was unenthused. He didn't even smile at the destruction. He dropped the bat and walked out the door, whistling a strange, unplaceable tune. "Have you been to church lately?" you ask. Mara sighs. "I always go to church. What else would I do?" "Just thought I'd ask." "I have to go," she says. "I'll get back to you on the funeral." She hangs up. You're left with your thoughts and plenty of whiskey. That will be enough for today. Or maybe it won't. Perhaps at nightfall, you'll go for a drive. Yes, that will do. You'll push into the night, let the pines rush past in a blur. You won't listen to the radio. It can't tell you anything you don't already know. Thank you. Next up is Emma Boggs. She's from Atlanta, Georgia. She's a first-year fiction student in the MFA program at UNCG, where she works as an editorial assistant in the Greensboro Review office. Please welcome Emma Boggs.
Thanks, Glenn. So tonight I'll be reading from a work in progress from the semester, which is a short story called Snow Day. For context, it is set at Christmas time, and it follows a father-daughter duo who live in Athens, Georgia. It's told in the perspective of the father, whose name is Ian. Ian's daughter, Hare, is a bundle of 6-year-old energy, and she really wants it to snow outside. In the excerpt I'm reading from tonight, Hare displays her growing unrest over the lack of snow, and this triggers a tragic memory for Ian, which is of the unexpected death of his wife and Hare's mother, Piper, who died when Hare was a baby. Thank you so much for everyone who's listening tonight. Snow Day. Back at the house, Hare rummages in the kitchen for a spoon to hide under her pillow, which she insists will make it snow tonight. At first, she wants to use a kitchen ladle, chanting to convince me that the bigger the better, but I persuade her to take a smaller but still hefty soup spoon instead. In her room upstairs, she lays it down on her mattress with such tenderness and grace that I can't help but smile. Then I realize that she's crashing hard from her pancake sugar fest, so I don't offer to read her a bedtime story. Instead, I kiss the top of her head, say goodnight. I turn on her nightlight, which she never asks me to do, but I do anyways, in case she needs to see where she's going if she gets up in the night. I lock the doors downstairs and then drift in the direction of bed myself. Later on, I wake disoriented to darkness and the sounds of wailing. I'm in Hare's room within seconds before fear can materialize within me. She is standing at her window in the dark, and even before she turns around, I can see she's in wild hysterics, rage crying into the glass, her shoulders shaking. What is it, I ask, kneeling beside her. Hare's face is red and wet, but the anger in it softens when she looks over. The spoon, she trails off weepily. The spoon. I pull her into a hug. I know, I say. No snow. I want to be like Mama in the snow, she sobs. I want to be like Mama when you lived in Manhattan and could play together in the snow. I start to speak, but she is taken by her rage again, pushing me away and flinging off her pillow to unearth the spoon, which sits in silent hibernation. She screams, "I hate you," in its direction, and then grabs for it. I watch as she chucks the spoon across the room, and it collides with a picture frame on her dresser, which falls and shatters across the hardwood floor. "Hair," I yell, caught off guard. I put out my hand to stop her from stepping towards the broken glass, and then switch on a lamp. When I speak again, I'm surprised by the evenness of my tone. Take a step back and stay there while I get the vacuum. Do not move from where you are. Don't move and do not pass go, or you will be penalized. She looks surprised, too, by the destruction she's caused and stands in silence, her face still streaming when I come back with my shoes on, carrying the vacuum. The broken picture frame goes in the trash, but I tuck the undamaged baby photo of Hair into her top dresser drawer. When I'm done with the vacuum, she gets back in her bed and I sit at the foot of it. "Hey, Pumpkin," I say. She wipes at her face with her sleeve. I'm disappointed, too. "Why won't it snow?" she asks in a whisper, hugging herself tight. "I don't know," I say. "The weather isn't trustworthy. There's a chance it could snow later tonight or tomorrow, but you shouldn't bank on it. I'm trying not to bank on it." After I'm finished saying this, my brain continues the conversation, and I think of Piper and I, of the way our lives together could not be banked upon. Hair burrows her face into my shoulder, not crying anymore, just tired. I keep talking for a while. I tell her a story I was reminded of from seeing her baby picture, of when I'd been out for a walk with infant Hair in her stroller, and a few ladies in our neighborhood scolded me for the mismatched outfit I'd put her in. This makes nowadays Hair laugh, and before long she is falling asleep again. Just as I'm leaving, however, she pipes up. "Daddy, can you put the spoon back under my pillow for me?" "Yes, Hair," I say. "I can." I find my tired eyes open yet again in the night, and I lean over to see that my phone says it's 4 in the morning. My ears ring with the phantom wailings of Hair's tantrum. I step to my bedroom window in the dark, which looks out over our backyard. In the dim light of the moon, I can see it still hasn't snowed. Poor Hair with her poor spoon. I shiver and I reach for a sweatshirt. The temperature, at least, seems like it's ideal. How hard then could it be to sprinkle a few frozen fractals of water across the lawns and rooftops of our neighborhood? Even a light dusting would help Hair to be happy. I go in to check on her, to be reassured by the sound of her even breathing. I do this a lot in the night, the sound check. My mind always wanders to the worst possibilities. It always has, but after Piper died, it's wandered all the more. Hair's breaths are slow and tranquil, thank goodness. In the kitchen, I fumble for tea. My head is in a rushing mess that I don't think chamomile can calm, but I'll try anyways. I'm thinking about the disappointment of the past 2 days, about the uncertainty of it all for Hair, about Hair wailing over wanting to be like her mother. And beneath that, subtle subconscious moving to conscious, I'm thinking of the day of her death, of the phone call I got as I was taking the subway home from the office. It was February the 16th, a Friday. I'd noticed a lot of couples out together, probably for a belated Valentine's dinner that couldn't have been worked into the busy week, which we'd been planning to do that evening ourselves. When Piper's sister Ellie called, I waited to call her back until after I stepped off at my stop, planning to walk and talk, thinking the call wasn't a big deal. Ellie and her husband, Mitch, lived in Manhattan too, and we would get together with them nearly every weekend. When I called her back, the first thing she asked was where I was. In her voice was a deadness. "Why?" I demanded, already suspecting the worst, already knowing its arrival. There was still a good deal of snow along the sidewalks, but it was slush-like, browning like an exposed fruit. "Why do you want to know where I am?" Ellie wanted to wait until I got to the hospital, where she would meet me outside to talk before we walked in. I asked her to just spit it out. She said there was nothing else to be done, that it was over, that she had just gotten a call from Lenox Hill where Piper had been showing her friends the baby. There had been a freak failure of the lungs and Piper had not made it. From there, things got messier. I hung up the phone. I ran. Back to the subway. I got on. So many couples. I headed to Lenox Hill, to my bird and my bunny. I got off. There was the hospital, looming impossible. I stepped inside, ran down hallways, bypassed people and walkers and people just walking. In a hallway were Ellie and Mitch, hair and Ellie's arms. Thank you, I said, shuffling her to mine. Ellie and Mitch were not okay. Ellie and Mitch were so sorry. In a room was Piper. Piper in a bed, Piper in silence, Piper in stillness. Piper surrounded by her colleagues and friends, by the other nurses and doctors, natural and not natural. What happened? Piper still silent, Piper still still. The nurses and doctors were so sorry, and they didn't know. You don't know what happened? They didn't know why she had had a pulmonary embolism. She was healthy, I argued. They agreed with me. They were so sorry. I leaned over to hear her breathing. Sound check failure. A blood clot, they said. A compromise of the relationship between the lungs and the heart. A blockage in the pulmonary arteries. The saddle embolus, they suspected. PE. Fatal, undetected. Normally, things like tachypnea help detect. They were so sorry. A clot and a compromise. Piper was the heart and I was the lungs, and we had been compromised. Or maybe it was in reverse. I, the heart, and Piper, the lungs. We had been compromised. Because some time had passed, they didn't think it was related to the pregnancy. Where's hair? I asked. There in your arms, they said. In my arms. A tiny weight in my arms. A tiny certainty. Certainty is certainly a liar. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and now I'd like to switch gears from that dismal note and introduce my classmate and friend, Rebecca Etheridge. Rebecca is a poet from Central Florida. Her work has appeared in Cold Mountain Review and Cackalack, and she currently studies poetry in the MFA program at UNCG.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I will be reading 3 poems that I've been working on and revising this semester. I'm glad to be here and have you all listening. I couldn't talk about my mother's body. The doctors talked about what was in her body. The stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer, the liquid in the lungs, the drugs induced to soothe, not to save. But I wanted to tell them how I saw my mother's body, how her feet shuffled on the floor of our house as she moved from her flannel-sheeted bed to the bathroom sink, where she'd leave the door cracked open because she lacked strength to shut it, tried to move what was inside of her out, how her spine hunched when she tried to walk in time to her still fast thoughts, though she only paced with the slowing pump of her lungs, in step with each heavy breath, pause, breathe, step, pause. How her nose whined like the wind in the pines, long and lonely, breath eking out from the cloud in her chest, every exhale enshrouded in the smell of sour Zalcori and ibuprofen's lie of relief. How her skin swelled over her bones, the fluid in her body smoothing calluses and stretching scars, hands soft to the touch once again, fingers unable to bend and going limp as the illness no longer thinned her. How her legs finally bowed to the ground, swollen and veined, imbalance revealing her pain, unable to stand her own small weight, gravity becoming grace as she fell down. How could I tell anyone about my mother's body after I saw her in the hospital bed, monitors marking the deaths from within, and I hid behind my sister's back like a child? The second one is called Modern Day Disciple. 1. After the church drama, Father sits in the cab of his pickup truck and strikes a righteous pose in his borrowed robes, sunglasses resting on his red nose, contemplating the gospel or how long it will take my mother to capture his image. Sunday school teacher, preacher of the healing word, he doubts like Thomas if he'll ever hear the click, get up out of his seat, leave to make disciples of the 12-pack he's got hidden under the bed. Father, who sits 5 rows back from the pulpit, pushes himself forward off the truck when my mother is finished, goes inside, strips off the clothes he wears, and bears down on his disbelief, gives in to his fears, and drinks a beer. 2. 3 days after I hear from my father, I am in my Cavalier. I drive myself forward through tears and the time we've had to separate us, tell myself this is for the best, to see him sick, hopeful for forgiveness. Prodigal father, come to me at last. He is not the father I knew. His skin is mottled with cancer's slow crucifixion, red nose elongated from alcohol's hand, body barely there, an imprint in the lazy boy in which he sits. I am lost. He ushers me forward with rheumatoid fingers, requests I sit on his lap, even though I am sure I will crush him. I am not the small child he once knew, but he believes in me still, so I rest gently against him. Daughter, he says, listen. Never touch alcohol a day in your life. Look at me. I don't want this for you. And even though I have looked before, what I don't tell him is that last summer I drank until I saw him stumbling behind my eyes, and that I cried because I believed I had turned into my father. And this last one is called On Brooding. Each morning, our Rhode Island red Rhoda laid an egg, which I would take, still warm, from under her rump to hand to my mother, who'd fry it sunny side up for me to eat. And each afternoon, Rhoda flew from her perch to ruffle around the house in search of a suitable egg that might replace the one I took. At night, she brooded with can openers, cans of red beans, butter knives, my mother's tarnished wedding ring, as if those things could be the eggs she bore for me. My mother claimed it was a hen's nature to keep even the silliest things warm, but I did not know that secretly she was the one that had placed them there underneath. Each morning in the week after my mother's death, I search for what to keep and what to set aside. I sort and unsettle their roost, disuse, dusting over everything, ruffle through the clutter to find what calls to me. But all I can see are things that have no more meaning. Unfiled papers, saved receipts, sour sweet sheets stained with sweat, the pillow she nested against when she lost breath. She always said we couldn't take it with us, that our inheritance was not of this earth, and I believed her. So I throw away her papers, set aside her 2 upright bases, black bear lamp, cabin in the woods quilt, and feel no guilt for following her will. But in the morning, after the estate sale, I weep for the little things. The copper Epcot ball figurine, the extra packs of bass strings, the pressed maple leaf, only things but those that made her. And all I'm left with to keep are the tears that seep into the pillow under my head, keeping my cheeks warm. Thank you. Next, we have Jillian Perry, who is a fiction writer from California. Her work is forthcoming in the Carolina Quarterly, and she is a proud member of the first-year fiction cohort. Please welcome Jillian.
Hi everyone, my name's Jillian. I'm so excited to be reading for you tonight. I'll be reading from a piece I've been working on this semester. It's called No Cure Like the Sea, and it's starting right at the beginning, so I don't think I need to give any context. Last night, I drowned, and this morning I can't seem to die. Watching bugs wake up this morning is the worst of it. Maybe when you die, the world reminds you of the best thing you lost before it seals you off. He lays in our bed, his right arm slung over the memory of where I had been, my hot impression that should be in the mattress. I move to be under that arm, full of knotted muscles like cables that hold trains in cities. As I touch my dead nose to his, the wild and wiry hairs on his arms stand up now, militant, alert. He sucks in a breath, his eyes fluttering open, eyes like water. I run a finger along his face, tracing the curve of his cheek, the ridge of his pink bottom lip. Goosebumps crawl up his neck. He sits up, as if surging out of a cold bath, his chest heavy with breath, calling my name in a shaky whisper. Abby? Ab. I like to think he knows that I'm there, watching him wake one last time. I call him Bugs because his eyes are so big and bulgy, like two marbles. He loves to read deeply, let novels absorb him until I can't reach him anymore. He's at his furthest away from me when he's in our leather armchair, a wrinkle knitting his brow, his eyes white and round, scanning over pages. His big knees would tuck into his chest the later into the night he read, and he would remind me so much of a child that I would sit on the arm of the chair and stroke his thick hair back from his forehead. His rough fingers would take mine, bring them to his lips, then hold my palm to his shoulder, his eyes still scanning. I didn't consider myself lucky in love, probably because I didn't believe in it. With divorced parents, it's to be expected, yes? It's simply too easy to be cynical and moody, and of course that will never happen for me because it's just not real. Bugs didn't think like that. Bugs thought, yes, we met in October. It just makes sense to bring Abby to Thanksgiving in November. He told me his mother had squealed on the phone at the thought of meeting me, and I had squirmed, thinking that she and the rest of the family must be huggers. I remember digging through my drawers before that Thanksgiving for one pair of black tights without runs, thinking I absolutely had to have tights, even though his family lived in San Diego and the forecast was expecting a late November heat wave. The sweat in the crook of my knees would be worth it if I didn't have to shave my legs. I felt absolutely reckless going to this event with Bugs, who I didn't know and who didn't know me, but my family had never had Thanksgiving dinner, and I was curious why people ate turkey and cranberry sauce together on one plate. We drove, and he told me non-stop stories. His little brother eating too many marshmallows last year, his parents inevitably fighting with his grandparents about the fact that his mom was their family breadwinner. How his cousins would be bringing partners too, so I shouldn't feel weird about being there. Easy laughter. I was right about his family being huggers. His mom pressed me to her like I was a stuffed bear, no consequence for hugging too tight. There is a place set for me at the table, my name in cursive on a little folded yellow piece of construction paper, a little paper acorn on the side. Bugs kept a hand on me all night. The small of my back, my shoulder blade, my ass when he thought no one in his family could see. I felt those areas tingling, curdling, like milk gone sour. I had no idea how to talk to Bugs' uncle, his nephew, his brother's girlfriend, who asked me questions like, "So, what's your favorite place to take him? You're local, yeah? Has Bugs told you about us? Are you absolutely loving each other?" I had no idea why everyone laughed when the kids insisted on eating first, little taffeta dresses and ties, declaring to me that they hated Thanksgiving. I sat facing strangers with Bugs' nose, who looked at me with sad dog eyes. Poor Abby. Isn't used to all this fuss. Each row of picket fence teeth said to me that I didn't belong. Each manicured hand on my arm was a way to escort me out. When a paper plate piled with gray and brown was placed in front of me, I ran my tongue along the top of my mouth, remembering toast for dinner. I remembered high school, when I would yell in the halls just to hear my voice echo, and walk around my dad's neighborhood, looking at the same houses over and over again. Maybe it was the identical rust-colored roofs, the daisies lining the front walkways, the kids hollering to each other on bikes and scooters, but the loneliness had sat in me, heavy. Each little white home added another stone to my limbs, another reminder that I was inevitably cursed with myself. So as I would slump back home, so droopy and dense that I had to lie down on Dad and Stephanie's perfectly white couch, all I would ache for was warmth, something wanting me. Bugs never seemed to be without people who wanted him. Company used to come at the price of my body. Those high school boys all bled together, Axe cologne and extra gum and limp Magnum condoms, all one swirl of nude and heat and sweat. They would slide in and out of me, and I would squeeze my eyes shut, searching for feeling, trying to forget the acne-spattered face above me. Some of them would ask me to turn around and would slam themselves into me, both of us throbbing, releasing our own pain. I don't think any of those ones kissed me. Once they were gone, I would remember their clammy hands and the smell of their sweat, my body tingling in all the places they had been. My shoulders would ache from staying knotted up to my ears. My calves would throb because they had stayed so tense, keeping my big toes up straight. My eyes would ache behind their lids, and I would shake off tears, unable to understand why I needed to cry. Acid would rest in my throat as I would throw on a sweater over my bra and my underwear, needing to be in the ocean. It was lucky that Dad and Stephanie were so rich and lived so close to the beach. The ocean was where I could cry, ducking my head under waves and letting the sobs heave out from me. Salt flushed my ears and nose, zinging the aching from my eyes. I cupped seawater and rubbed it into my legs, my arms, my shoulders, my calves, smooth and silky like clean bed sheets. I would lie on my back and unhook my bra, letting my nipples breathe above the waves. My bra, the flag, me, the flagpole. As the tide fanned my hair out behind me and then pulled it back down over my face, I would stare at the moon, the only light besides the hazy lamps on the pier. The moonlight dripped over me. It loved my body. The ocean was safe. The ocean was mine. Who was I to think I could ever be safe at this table full of strangers? Who was I to think that bugs could be mine? Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to introduce my good friend, Miss Sophie Shaw. Sophie's a writer from Hillsborough, North Carolina. Her work has appeared in Cellar Door and The Raven's Perch, and she's currently in her first year of the MFA program in fiction at UNCG. Please welcome Sophie.
Hello. Tonight I'm going to be reading from the beginning of a short story called Narrow, and it's about a high school senior named George who lives in Cape Hatteras in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. His name was George, like George Michael, except his last name was actually Etheridge, George Etheridge. It made him sound like he was about 100 years old. He was average build, and the year when he played football, he hadn't been half bad. It was just that the practices took up a lot of time, and some of the guys were real assholes, though most of them were nice. His friend Marina convinced him that it would be more fun to hang around practice rather than to actually participate. That way they could leave whenever they got bored. He was so pale, he had to spend the entire summer working to get some color. He and Marina would roll up the sleeves of their t-shirts and lay out beside the soccer field. Sometimes if they were still there after practice had ended, she'd take off her shirt too and lay there in just a bra. Then guys would come over and make comments about her titties, and George would make eye contact with Marina and laugh. When she got tired of their attention, she'd say, "Jesus, a bra is exactly the same thing as a swimsuit. I don't get what the big deal is." But sometimes guys still weren't tired of looking at her, so she'd have to pull on her shirt. George liked looking at Marina's chest, at the way her bra curved so perfectly across her breasts, at the way they rested nicely while she lay on her back. But it wasn't like that. Marina was his friend. He and Marina were going to prom together, and George was so excited about it. He planned to wear a pink suit. It was already ordered. These dumbass, ignorant kids would really lose it when they saw him, but he didn't care. He looked fine as hell, and even Crew Connors would have to admit it, if only to himself. If he really wanted a nice color by prom, George knew he should go lay out at the beach. There'd be no way he'd take off his shirt in front of these guys, even if Marina did. He pushed his shoes and socks off using his feet, though, so at least his feet could get some color. Some kids got spray tans for prom, but he was broke as shit, and anyway, that felt like cheating. "Hey, Marina," he nudged her with his elbow. "Let's go to the beach this weekend." She had her arms slung across her eyes to block the sun, but she turned her head to the side and squinched at him. "I gotta work." Oh, that's right. George had a job too, but the place where he worked hadn't opened yet for the season. Sunday too? No, I don't know. I have to check the schedule. Marina turned her head back and slid her arm across her eyes. Maybe George would go alone. His mom might even come with him, but usually she slept until afternoon on Saturday and only got up in time to go to DDX, which is what people called Dirty Dick's Crab House if they were embarrassed to say the name. George's mom was always too embarrassed to say the name. Anyway, he'd kind of feel like a loser going to the beach with his mom. I would never date anyone at this school. Marina was looking across the field at the team carrying their gear back to the shed where it was kept. It's too fucking small. Marina was hooking up with a guy she met on Tinder. His name was Luca, and he lived up the beach in Nag's Head and worked at the Harris Teeter. He was from Serbia and had come with the other foreign people who got work visas for the summer tourist season, but that was a few years ago now, and he had decided to stay. George had never met him, but apparently he was almost 30, or maybe he was 30. Marina wasn't sure. Last fall, they had just been hooking up, and Marina had said it definitely was not a thing and that it wasn't going anywhere, but now she'd basically moved in with him. George watched as the last soccer players on the team strolled toward the entrance through the band room. Guys here are so immature anyway. For real. Marina didn't sit up, but George started to pull on his Vans. They had been his Christmas gift 2 years ago, and he had tried so hard to keep them clean because he knew his parents couldn't really afford them, but now they were pretty dirty. Oh, God, Marina sat up quickly. I forgot to show you what Luca did to his hair. Marina shaded her phone screen from the sun as she scrolled through her photos. You're gonna pee yourself. He looks like a fucking idiot. Finally, she found it. Here. She shoved the phone into his hand and then rolled back into the grass laughing. It took a moment for George's eyes to adjust so that he could see. He got highlights? He rolled back into the grass beside Marina and laughed. Oh my God, what is this, 2002? Marina reached for her phone to look at the photo again. This fool thinks he looks so fine too. She smiled to herself. You know how he hates when I call him Grandpa? Well, I told him that he looked like a Backstreet Boy and he didn't get that it was an insult. George covered his face with his hands. Oh, baby. I know, right? God, look at his stupid face. Are you really moving in with him? George stood and rolled down the sleeves of his t-shirt. Marina propped herself up on her arms, but still didn't put her shirt on. I mean, I basically already do. I only sleep at Mama's when I have to work early the next day, since it's closer. Yeah. Pretty much all my shit is at his house anyway. I'll move the rest of it after school ends. This summer I'm going to save up the rest of what I need for a car. I'm going to work up the beach at that resort where all the foreign people work. I can get at least 60 hours. George had heard about those jobs. People who worked and made so much money. Sometimes they made $200 or $300 a night in tips alone. But he would only be able to do a job like that if he moved into the house they rented for their staff. And he didn't want to live in some big shitty beach house where he was the only person who spoke English. People said the foreign people were fun and partied a lot, but it sounded too crazy for him. He did want to travel though. That was his plan for after graduation. He was going to travel in Europe. He'd have to start out somewhere like England so he wouldn't have to worry about not speaking any other languages. He'd taken 3 years of Spanish in high school, so he could have gone to Mexico, but he really wanted to go to Europe. And anyway, he hadn't really learned much Spanish when it came down to it. Last year in January, he'd gone to a party Marina was having. George's parents were really Christian, so they didn't believe in drinking, and he didn't either, so he didn't drink at all the whole time. He spent the entire party trying really hard to have a good time and worrying that everyone thought he was a loser for not drinking. But as the night wore on, he realized everyone was much too wasted to care. People spilled drinks everywhere, and 2 of the girls threw up in the bathroom, but they didn't make it to the toilet, so it got all over the wall beside the toilet and on the floor. Marina's mom was in the kitchen, and she was wasted too. Something about seeing her like that creeped George out. 2 kids he didn't even know started having actual sex in the hallway, and it was about at this point that George decided to leave. Somehow he got talked into giving 3 people a ride home, driving Skylar Davis's car all the way up to Rodanthe. Rodanthe was the northmost village on Hatteras Island, in the opposite direction from where George lived. It was almost 3 a.m. and about 25 degrees outside with a wind that cut right through him. George's hand felt frozen right away on the car keys, and his bare feet and his flip-flops were immediately numb. As they pulled out of Buxton, he watched the beam from the lighthouse in the rearview mirror. It looked like it was stretching out from the tiny lights of the rest of the village, reaching for something across the water. Soon he rounded the bend, and the light was blocked from view. The heat felt good, pumping out on his feet, and the people in the back seat had gone quiet. The silence felt almost loud after the noise from the party. The stars were shockingly beautiful above him. There were places on this island where the land was only as wide as the road itself. With a little sand leading into the sound on one side of the road and constantly eroding dunes leading into the ocean on the other, the island became little more than a sandbar with a road on it. On days when the wind was strong, the road flooded, and that was without any rain. When storms came through, the road might be closed for days while crews came in to clear off sand and build back up the dunes. Then the island was cut off from the mainland and the rest of the Outer Banks, except by boat. People said one day it would all be gone because of sea level rising. Tonight, though, the headlights seemed only as bright as birthday candles. They barely seeped into the utter darkness. In the little pool of light they formed on the road ahead, he watched the ghostly white sand blowing like fog over the road, obscuring the dark asphalt and moving with mesmerizing constancy. It reminded him of a field trip he'd taken in middle school to a science museum where there was a fake cloud in the weather room made from a machine that created vapor. The lights from the villages ahead and behind him were too distant to be visible, and instead his eyes were flooded with light from the stars. So many and so beautiful, he felt like crying. When he looked up, all around him was black water and brilliant starlight, and it was easy to forget that he was driving on a road. It felt like he was in the middle of a vast sea, flying effortlessly, and able to go in any direction he chose. He had to force himself to remember that the road here was narrow. The dunes were constantly sliding down onto it, and he'd better stop looking up if he wanted to make it to the next village and drop all these drunk people off where they belonged. It is my great pleasure to introduce Sam McCormick, who is a poet and visual artist from Cincinnati, Ohio. They are a first-year poetry candidate here at UNCG.
Man, thank you so much. That was so funny and awful, in a good way. Oh my God. So I'm gonna get going, and so before I do, I just wanted to say thank you to UNCG, to Michael, DJ, and Terry for hosting all this, and all these beautiful people in this room right now, and my cohort in general. I can't believe how lucky I am. Every poem I'm about to read is from March till a few days ago, and it wouldn't be possible without obviously everyone in my life, especially Matt Hart, Chris Mattingly, and my little brother. So the first poem has an epigraph by Lynn Hagenian, and I wrote it on my birthday. It's called Self-Portrait as Dog. If your dog stays out of the room, you get the fleas. Sometimes I wake up a dog, demonic, rumbling, barreling from my chest and kicking, confused and frantic, but sometimes I just wake up. Today I woke up and it's Monday. Though every day these days seems like a Tuesday and already it's Thursday. Last Sunday was yesterday, and I turned 29, so I woke up a dog, but also I woke up a slightly older dog with its head whipped and white whiskers grown undoubtedly a little early because of worry, or thanks to the info my mother gave me to use in the effort of dictating a body. I think of her often as I am out in the deep forests, unburying the muddy ghosts that call my name. I wonder how they know it. Can't be sure if I've ever heard it spoken. How do I know it's mine? And not just a pet name, a for now name, or how do I know it to be a name at all? I paw at the earth with my questions, my teeth all moving in unison toward the back of my head as I bark at the sky while my blue eye whirls wildly in its socket and the other dies in trembling darkness, howling. I'm a blur, behind me a mountain, and before me a cavern, so cavernous, its endlessness so ravenous, no echo is hero enough to make it back alive, and it's Monday, and today I woke up a foolish pup as I have ever been. And somehow I know it's about to rain. This is called Ode on a Kissing Booth. Epigraph. What leaf-ringed legend haunts about thy shape?
John Keats. Funny the terror in my heart at having not seen you for so many weeks, and the wondering how to kiss you without thinking of dying, slowly and alone, or from the cost of being saved by a hospital stay in America. Don't get sick. Don't get sick. I chant aloud, thinking about my mother, how 3 years ago her lungs filled with water, thinking how no one is safe from themselves or their bodies failing them. How quietly that which might kill you can slide into a space you occupy without you knowing it's there. Don't get sick. Don't get sick. I say to the sky, thinking of my brother, wondering if he's washed his hands today, if he's staying away from strangers on his way to work. Don't get sick. Don't get sick. I scream in my brain, wondering if you wonder about these things the way I do, or fear making me sick like I fear making you, and I can't help but wonder if maybe something is already here, holding our hands that neither you or I can recognize. Two-Hearted. This is after my everyday beer. Two-Hearted. Because one isn't enough. I crack open a second, and there I am on my way again, on my same old shit. Feels different this time, like it wouldn't be hard to quit if I needed. And don't I need that dirty lake fish looking at me to remember where it was I once was, so I can divine the place I'm going, a paradise, a grave, a hill from which I will testify to the human condition of being a human, amplified by the conditions of being a human. A dirty creek creature mouthed open in horror, or a romantic oh, in order to breathe. 12 full-ounce spurts bursting in pines, grapefruit and hops. My life never left me without my body fighting it. I should clarify this next poem I wrote before Halloween and titled it afterwards, for those of you who might have been present. Got fucked up on Halloween. To get soft, I punch a tree till my knuckles bleed. I punch the sky till it notices me. I punch my face till I know my place and leave my body dizzy, stupid, little, struck dumb and dripping. Life stuffs all messily on the muddy, muddy ground. Damn, my ears are ringing. Got this murder above me, circling crows. Can't hear if you're calling. Just leave me to my mossing. Just leave me to my crumbling. Let me clench my mangled fists and squish the ants there crawling. Great, I got two more. This one's for my little brother. I know you're watching. All right, it's called Trains, for my brother. Anyone who knows me knows my life started that first day in December when you were born. Still glowing in my memory, I see you there always. The first bundle of anything I had ever held against my heart. I see you sleeping and breathing, and I see our mother looking tired and gazing at us there, and our father hovering somewhere in my periphery, ready to drag me away from the two of you, and I am still kicking and screaming to go back into that room. It's fall now, and I live in North Carolina. And you're back home in Cincinnati, and we were talking just yesterday about the leaves changing colors. How scary it is for it to be so warm outside this time of year. how you wish you could wear your new red scarf. We talk and talk about the things we've been doing, and you say, listen, I don't know what it is, but I love trains. And I remember the game we had played as children. You on the top bunk and I on the ground, tossing back and forth your balled up bed sheets, pretending we were athletes. How I had lobbed it onto the tall lamp in the corner of the room as if it were a basketball, and it started smoking, immediately burning a giant hole in Thomas the Tank Engine's face, and our mother looked so afraid of the missing space. And I took it to show and tell that week to warn my friends how easy it is to accidentally catch everything on fire. And you're there in my ear, still speaking to me from my phone, and I ask you to keep talking, to tell me everything that you love about trains. I ask if you like the locomotive behemoths or the bullets that tear through the air, if you like the waiting platforms where people seem to always be nearly missing their trains before narrowly making it just in time, or how sometimes the trains leave their passengers behind in a cloud or a crowd or an empty space, and you tell me you like it all. That you love watching people move between the cars, how everyone is in their own world together, looking at the floors or nothing, or out the windows at the blurring, as it moves steadily along a track which has been set long before the firebox was lit, and you say you love how they only move forward. All right, last one. Thanks so much for joining us. What is not, then, is in every case the world. And I go on, a wild dog, with its jank-ass collar jangling louder and louder in the fog. While the river carries the coal, capitalism continues to hide its erection while I cough, I cough, I cough. I mean, I bark. I translate this devilish spark despite the enemy resting so confidently next to me, despite the dampness growing where I see. Tomorrow the moon will be full. But tonight a wolf bangs on a typewriter like a fool. You have the right to remain, it writes over and over. I am a ghost in a crash cart. It was silence what killed me. My paws have all gone raw with madness. I go on and on, cursing King Lord God with my best words, my bleary pronouncements, making a mockery of the monsters whose beaded sweat is slowly collecting on my Remington. The cloud of poison, soaking the wool, hovering above the bodies of my brethren, whose bodies are also my body. I have not prepared for this. Apocalypse in which I cannot reach for the face of my comrade and, clenching with both hands, command them not to die. I take a walk while the sun is still free. The snakes make figure eights around the discarded cigarette butts cast to the concretes. Someone asked me for change, but a rock in my pocket is all I have to offer. So our last and final reader is the magnificent Angela Windsor. From South Florida. Angela is a first-year fiction writer, photographer, and I just feel so blessed to be in her presence. So delight in the last reader of the night. Angela.
Thank you, Sam. Truly. We're blessed to be in your presence. Okay, hi. If you're still with us, thank you so much. I am going to read from my novel project, my novel in progress. I hope, God, I hope it's in progress. And I'm just going to read right from the prologue through a little bit of chapter 1, if that's okay. So I don't think we need any additional context. Okay. What I still carry everywhere with me is the haze of the place. How night air greeted hot and humid mornings with thin veils of fog. How I'd look out my hotel room window and feel as if I'd woken up in a cloud. How the sun burned through it and a new kind of haze permeated, smoke in the streets. The very last embers of fires lit the night before by fathers and brothers who brushed the day's trash into piles on corners and side streets, then threw a match at them. Or how Carla and the others led me into the haze of the market street where smoke rose from wheelbarrows and street carts, coloring the air with smells of sticky sweetbreads, empanadas, pico de gallo. I'd lose sight of her in the fog of it all. I was distracted. I was happy. And she'd reappear at my side, smiling, pulling me in a direction I didn't know but trusted anyway. The memories of those months spent working somewhere southwest of Managua are entirely unwilling to negotiate. There are things I want to put down, things I really hope to hold on to, and I don't get a say in either. Like the rooftop of that hotel, for instance, I'd like to imagine it folded away into the sheets of that hotel bed to be washed and replaced after I left. I don't want to think of what lingers there. I don't want to think of myself that way, but here it is. The rooftop above the hotel where I'd been living, the only hotel in that small city, had become a sort of refuge for me. A haven hidden away from the kind and curious eyes of locals, a cure for boredom or loneliness. Each night, I could climb the iron stairs and trust I'd find a gathering of others staying at the hotel. The Americans, the missionaries, the doctors, teachers, engineers, businessmen, most of us volunteers, most of us working for one of the thousands of nonprofits that freckled the Nicaraguan landscape. The group was ever-changing, always leaving, as people came and went throughout the summer. Mostly, I was content to sit quietly and listen to the shifting array of strangers who managed to cast off the pretense of selflessness when they reached that rooftop. I considered myself to be different from all of them, but now I can't remember why. What I do remember is the sweating glass of tequila we passed around when the soda ran out, a worm curled at the bottom of the bottle, the way it felt brave and interesting to shoot it straight, to let a stranger touch a lime to my lips. Or the way it loosened tongues and brought on jokes, sometimes at the expense of the world below us. I can't speak about those jokes. I haven't held on to them. But I know I laughed along. I remember gut laughing, head back into warm breezes. And I know this was in part due to the exhaustion of our days, to the heat fatigue of our bodies. But I think now, if any of us had been honest with ourselves, it was also because of the elevation. We were above and we felt it. Above correction, above reproof. Above our friends and family back home who were spending their summers tied to desks, we gathered above those city streets most nights so that we could look down on them. We knew best. And had anyone ever accused us of being anything other than helpful, we might have been defensive, hostile even. What great sacrifices had we made in order to spend our summer vacations in that countryside? Had you asked any one of us, we would have loved to tell you all about it. That summer, my name was Laura, as in Laura, as in parrot, someone who talks too much. The name came from the older kids, the teenagers, and it was given in jest, meant to be ironic, because of course I didn't talk too much. My problem was that I was too quiet. They called me Laura to tease me, but I didn't get the joke at first, not until weeks later. I thought they were calling me a parrot because maybe they found me colorful, or because the birds are pretty. The name caught, and I liked the lie of it. I liked my delusion that they found me beautiful, the way the R rolled, the way the littlest kids shouted it when they saw me coming. I don't know how many of them ever actually knew my real name. Even on the rooftop, I let myself be Laura. Chapter 1. It started in my mother's kitchen, a scraping of warped wood against warped wood. My mother struggled to open the window above the sink. Then, gauzy curtains lifting in breeze. We'd nearly arrived at summer, and the apple blossoms were in full bloom in our neighborhood, the Michigan winter finally dissolving into longer, greener afternoons, and I knew my mother would want to let as much of that sweetening air into the house as she could. It was Saturday. Pastor Todd was coming for lunch. I found her at the sink, barefoot, working her way through a pile of yesterday's dishes, the back of her hair flattened from sleep. I liked her best this way, messy in her oversized nightshirt, her weight shifting from side to side, rocking to the tune of a song in her head. It was easier to see something of myself in her when she was like that. "You slept in," she said when she realized I was there, and there was no judgment in it.
With her hands deep in soapy water, she nodded over her shoulder, pointing her chin in the direction of the table. On it was an envelope addressed to me. It had been carefully, purposefully laid aside, a paycheck. They'd never been mailed to the house before. I always brought them home. Of course, I knew the paycheck would be arriving this way, but I hadn't told her about it yet. I wasn't exactly trying to hide it. We just had a habit of delivering our bad news quietly, leaving room for the other to make their own noise about it when they were ready. I'd been let go from the job at a failing print house that was only ever meant to be temporary. I'd taken the position just weeks after graduating college with a degree in English and the notion that I'd land a job in publishing. I think I knew peripherally how hard those jobs were to come by, but I think I believed instinctively I could be the exception. The owners of the print house, an older couple, liked me and were sweet, and so the temp job turned into nearly 6 years. But the industry I'd been learning was dying. When the couple decided to cut their losses and retire, they said they were sorry and promised to send along a month's pay. I joined my mother at the sink and began to dry as she washed. I knew she was waiting for me to speak first, to explain. "I don't work there anymore," I said when the silence became too thick between us. "They let me go," was the best I could do. "Oh," she said, restrained. It was a kindness, and it stung. She was very good at not overreacting, but her concern was evident in her hands and the way they tensed as she scrubbed grease from a pan, her knuckles bulbous and starting to show the early signs of arthritis. I hung a dried mug on its hook and let all the details spill out of me slowly. "I'm sorry," she said when I was done, and then quietly, "That's disappointing." I almost told her not to feel disappointed, that I wasn't even going to miss the job all that much, but then I wasn't sure if the job was what she was referring to. "Well," she wipes her hands down the front of her shirt, "I better go on and get ready." By ready, she meant her signature shade of neutral lipstick, her woody perfume, her hair twisted into a neat, low knot. She gave a tug on my ponytail, a gesture of affection she'd been doing since I was a child, and a confident, "We will figure something out for you," before she left me standing in the kitchen alone. That inclusive "we" felt like a hand around my throat. It was gutting, really, how much I needed her still. I think I knew even then how good I had it, and maybe that was part of the problem. I wasn't living up to it, all that goodness she made for me. I was 28 and still living in my mother's house. At the sink, I watched the grayed water drain, leaving behind the dark grit of old coffee grounds. They'd been staining the sink for years until there was nothing my mother could do to make it look clean. I gathered them up in my bare hands, a small offering my mother wouldn't ever see. I scrubbed the sink. Frustrated, I rubbed soap into places where the white porcelain had been stained brown, even as I knew they would not come clean. Thank you. And I don't actually know which camera to look at, so thank you, and you, and you. If you're still with us, we're so appreciative from whatever distance you are watching. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night.